Hello, my name is Gabrielle Resh Mcnally, and I am the director of the Women for the Land Initiative here at American Farmland Trust. And I'm so excited to share some stories of hope and resilience in dark times with all of you. I asked women who I respect and care for all across the country to answer a few simple questions about what is giving them hope in these difficult times. Many of us are surviving and learning to thrive in very difficult times, facing down a global pandemic with a lot of lives lost and a lot of impacts to our communities, to our health, to our industries. And we also are facing down climate catastrophe all around the country and indeed all around the world. And I look to women in agriculture, rural women who are leading the way with grace, determination, grit, and finding ways and glimmers of hope in difficult times. I'm excited to share a few of their reflections with you all and hope you all think on these questions yourself. Thank you.
I would say kids and their ability to just bounce back and it's put on a mask, do school and do virtual school, and they just keep on trucking.
People are really, I think, helping each other right now. I've noticed a lot of my friends and people in my network are just reaching out to lend a hand and help each other, and I think that gives me hope. And it feels like while things are really difficult right now, that is kind of becoming a catalyst for positive change in a lot of ways.
What gives me hope in times of darkness is the memory of our ancestral grandmothers who braided seeds in their hair before being forced to board transatlantic slave ships. They braided okra, cowpea, black rice, egusi melon, millet, sorghum, and other seeds as insurance for an uncertain future. And if they, in those times of darkness, could maintain a sense of hope and possibility and believe that there would be descendants to inherit those seeds, then I too and we too can maintain our strength in times of darkness.
So many people. I feel like there are so many grassroots organizations that are just coming together for their community to feed each other and help one another and really show up for one another.
Connection with humans and more than human species, connection with the earth, and grappling with a sense of place and belonging, finding that through wild tending, foraging for nettles, or by sitting and paying attention to the birdsong, and also grappling with the histories of stolen land and genocide of Native peoples, and understanding what it is to be in my body on this land in this moment. But I'm grateful for the connection and appreciate all the work that I know is happening, seen and unseen, in our communities to rebuild the earth, regenerate, and lean into our resiliency.
For anybody who is still able to wake up every day and feed themselves and go to work, because the weight of the world is heavy right now. The parents that are also working, or the students that are working and trying to do virtual classes, but they're still showing up every day. So I'm inspired by anybody who has the wherewithal and resilience to just simply show up to their daily life right now, because I think that's a huge accomplishment in itself.
The rising generation of Black and brown farmers reclaim ancestral relationship to land, work to provide food and medicine to our communities, and commit to an ever more inclusive and more just food system. Working to mitigate the impacts of climate change while at the same time trying to do our part to draw down carbon. We use Afro-Indigenous ancestral methods of farming, things like raised beds, mulches, cover cropping, compost, no-till, perennial polycultures, and we've seen during this incredibly wet year where flooding has caused immense damage in the agricultural systems in our area, that these high organic matter raised beds are able to mitigate those harmful impacts and at the same time are able to draw down tens of thousands of pounds of carbon every year and build a healthy soil ecosystem.
I think that having those interactions with kids and with my community, so just like connecting all of those things, help feed my soul.
Can you share an example of like an interaction with a kid that has sort of cultivated that for you?
Oh, sure. Yeah, my niece, she lives up in Portland, and I got to spend some time with her, and she's so excited about like vermiculture and worm composting, and so we always get to like see what she's growing and how she's feeding her worms and how they're feeding her garden. So yeah.
I feel like I'm cultivating resilience in my personal sphere by taking more downtime and not overworking. I feel like there was less boundaries in my life before this whole thing happened, and I'm doing a better job at cultivating personal space and taking downtime and encouraging others to do the same. And so that also kind of ripples out into my work life. So, and I feel like I'm actually more productive, more effective with the time I do spend working because of that. And collaborating a lot more than I used to, which is kind of amplifying everything in a positive way.
Hello, my name is Gabrielle Resh Mcnally, and I'm so happy to be here with you all today. Thank you for watching this beautiful video that many of our panelists here today contributed to. I am from American Farmland Trust, a national nonprofit that's been around for around 40 years, working to promote the protection of farmland, the sustainability of our practices that we use on that farmland, and increasingly working to support farmers in stewarding and staying on that land. As we know, we need farmers, we need the land, and we need the practices to sustain the land that feeds all of us. And I run our Women for the Land initiative, an initiative that's really based on supporting women farmers, women landowners, and increasingly new and beginning farmers who want to connect to the land and do the work of feeding us all. So it's such a pleasure to be here. Today's session is a reflection on what gives us hope. So you just saw the video, and I hope it's got you all thinking about what gives you hope in times that have been very bleak at moments. And I invite folks to put in the chat box if you can, anything that's giving you hope. Please introduce yourself, but also share where are you finding hope today in the darkness or in the light where you're standing. And you know, if you want to share about what you're tending, what you're caring for in these times, we'd love to hear that as well. So I invited a series of friends, colleagues, folks I admire to submit a video and their thoughts on these kinds of questions, really in a selfish way, because I needed some hope and I'm thinking that some of you also might need that as well. So what I'm going to do is stop talking here in a minute and ask some of my colleagues to share a little bit about themselves. So I've asked my colleagues to introduce themselves and give us a little bit more about where they're physically located. And then I've asked them to reflect a little bit more on what's giving them hope here today. Where are they finding that in the moment? And I'll let them share a little bit about what they do and how they come to this work, both as women in natural resources and living and or working in rural spaces and places. And the only thing I forgot to introduce about myself is that I'm based here in Oregon, on Calpuya land in the Willamette Valley. And I'm really happy to be joining you and being a part of this wonderful event that Rural Assembly is putting on. So I'm going to pass it off first to Afrose to share with us a little bit more about herself and what's giving you hope here today.
Thank you, Gabrielle. I'm so grateful to be with everyone here today. I was watching the streamcast earlier and the keynote speakers, and a lot of just hearing Diane Wilson's stories about seed keeping and her wisdom and the teachings give me hope. So I'm finding a lot of hope there. A little about myself. I am currently based in Walla Walla, Washington, ancestral Walla Walla, Cayuse, and Umatilla lands, and I grew up pretty close to here. I've spent a lot of time in cities, and at a certain point in my life realized that rural areas suit me and that I want to be doing land-based work, but it's something I came to later in life. And I just feel so much inspiration and hope. I work at the Blue Mountain Land Trust. I'm a fundraiser in development here. I'm pretty new here on staff, but just on Monday, I got to go out on a 3.5 hour road trip to Phipps Meadow, which is a property that the Blue Mountain Land Trust just acquired. It's the first property we've ever owned. We've been working on conservation easements for the last 22 years, but there's this amazing riparian restoration work that's happening there, and it's the headwaters of Cold Springs bubbling out into the middle fork of the John Day River. And there's actually Chinook and steelhead, not at this time of year, but that spawn there. And it's one of the few sort of natural no hatcheries on the in that whole sort of river basin system. I'm not a science person. I am the fundraiser person, but just to be able to be out on the land, and everybody our staff is largely women. The partners we work with out there are women. Our most recently closed property, it was for a conservation easement for an elder woman farmer who's in her late 80s now and has been on that property since the 1950s. And so it's really inspirational to me to be here with you all.
Awesome, Afrose. It's so wonderful to have you here. And we shared that Afrose and I have known each other for many years now, meeting each other for the first time as undergrads in college in Bellingham, Washington. So it's fun to be with you here today. I'll pass it to Heather, who unfortunately could not be on our video through some technical glitches, but we have you here in person.
Yes, thank you, Gabrielle. I'm so honored to be here with you all in this space right now. My name is Heather Medina Soceda. My pronouns are she, her, and ella, and I'm zooming in from the Calpuya area, Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde and the Siletz Indians. I currently live in Albany, Oregon. I work for the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and I am an Assistant State Conservationist for Field Operations. I cover southwestern Oregon, and I have a beautiful area that I get to work with my staff, farmers, landowners, producers, our customers, seeing conservation get on the ground. I am also a new mother. We recently adopted a 12-year-old little girl and a 7-year-old little boy. We have guardianship of them as of last year, and they definitely bring me joy in areas of darkness. One of the areas that we have been doing I guess I should claim that I have been doing a lot of work with them, raising mason bees that I got from our local Oregon State Extension Master Gardeners, and seeing those mason bees hatch has been pretty amazing and beautiful. The other area that I feel is that I have hope is even in the midst of some darkness or wildfires, that my staff and our landowners have been reseeding some of the forested areas that have been devastated by wildfires due to climate change and the fires. It is coming back, and that is what is awesome, is this little seedling here in the hand we have seen that the coming back of the land has been amazing, that Mother Earth is really taking care of herself and coming back. We have done and worked with landowners to get some tree planting established, and some of those have not been coming back on through the work that the producers have been doing, but just the natural regeneration that Mother Earth has been doing has been pretty phenomenal. Another area that gives me awesome hope is the conversations that we hear in this platform yesterday and today, these conversations with Black, Indigenous people of color, talking about women's issues, talking about land issues and tribal issues, and the seeds that we just heard again from Diane Wilson. That is pretty awesome. And at USDA, we have been seeing the renewed interest from Black, Indigenous people of color, especially women wanting to get into farming. And we have been working with those women, all customers, and however they identify, to give back, put their hands in the soil, feeling that connection again to those seeds in those native areas, and then also working with the tribes here in Oregon and across the US, getting back to traditional indigenous foods. So thank you, Gabrielle.
So much good stuff. It's awesome. It's a wonderful reflection on just how much there is to sort of be grateful for and hopeful about. Let me pass it to Amy.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Gabrielle. I'm Amy Garrett, and I am here in Corvallis, Oregon. And like Heather and Gabrielle, I'm also on Kalapuya, traditional Kalapuya land. And I work with Oregon State University Extension Service, so the Small Farms Program. And what inspires me and gives me hope in a lot of in the work realm is, well, the seeds are on my brain because we just saw the talk with Diane. But you know, each year when we plant cover crops, and I just went out to check it out, and then all the seeds are germinating and putting things to rest, and the rain that we just had this morning, that always gives me hope. Another realm is in this community of practice. So one of the things I'm doing in my work is developing a community of practice around dry farming practices that support growing with little to no irrigation. And some of that's variety trials and engaging farmers in hosting variety trials, seed saving, sharing seeds, and then working with open pollinated seeds through the Open Seed Source Initiative, and you know, starting to with the idea that making these more available in the future. So I am constantly inspired by the farmers and my colleagues who bring new innovations and ideas to the community. And while I chose my career in horticulture and pursued that path because of my love for plants, I find that I equally, I get inspiration from the plants, but also equally from the people that are working with the plants and coming together to share and adapt to the extremes that we're experiencing in the world right now. So I find a lot of hope in our ability to adapt together.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, I'm really thinking, you know, what kind of gave some inspiration for me for this session. And we've been participating, Women for the Land, with Rural Assembly everywhere for the last year, really, on a couple different sessions, all sort of centering on some themes around women leading in building climate resilience and community resilience. But it feels like a lot of what we're talking about is sort of this role that we see women playing, like in feeding their communities, in preserving and saving seeds. Leah Penniman, who was on the video from Soulfire Farm, and Diane Wilson spoke about, you know, the ways that Black and Indigenous women have been saving seeds for centuries, and as a way to sort of protect their ties to their history and their culture and their communities, and as self-preservation to sort of grow food in this very real way. But I just have been struck with like the power of that and how that sort of like growing into what feels to me as sort of working in the women in agriculture space, like this growing movement of women in agriculture who are taking leadership. You know, Afroz, you spoke about the way that you, all these women that you're working with in this space. And I think many of us see women rising and sort of leading. I know through the pandemic, I saw anecdotally, and we had conversations nationally about women really kind of centering that, feeding their communities in this way and meeting food security needs and in the time of the pandemic. And I don't think that's anything new. You know, scholars have talked about, you know, how women globally sort of support community food security needs and their family food security needs in this way that's so powerful and important. But so I guess maybe my question to you all is just kind of, yeah, how are you, you know, whether stories, if we kind of riff on that a little bit about how women in particular are guiding us and sort of being that flame of hope and resistance and resilience. If there's anything, you know, in that thread that you'd like to share, you know, tying more to seeds or agriculture, but I'm just really kind of pondering that a little bit. So I'd love whoever wants to sort of jump in if the ways that you're seeing that manifest in the work you're doing, the way women are leading. Go for it, Heather.
Sure. I forgot to mention I'm also the president of Women in the Natural Resources Conservation Service. And as a national organization, I have been in awe of the women across the country. And especially, as you said, during this pandemic, the mothers, people taking care of their children, balancing work. And it's been very, very hard, difficult, challenging, doing all of this. But I have been awestruck by these women and coming together and caring for each other, listening to each other, giving each other support, and not only for each other, but then also for our producers. I have heard many, many times meeting with our local farmers or producers, especially women, how hard and challenging it is right now with COVID. Prices are surging. Um, for them, the shortage of workers as well, and they're struggling, but they also want to do their service and provide our local foods to people to help with sustainable communities. So it's twofold: our farmers and especially our female farmers, and then also just the women in the circles I work with, just giving support because we definitely need it and need to talk to each other. So areas like this that we can talk to each other are really helpful. And yesterday's comments in one of the sessions I was in, it was just amazing just to, one, hearing some of the challenges women are having, but also just some of the support that women are giving to each other as well. Thank you.
Amy or Froze, any thoughts on sort of women you're seeing or the work of women in this space? And I guess I should say sort of I contend a lot with this idea of the framing of women and you know, who is included and who's not in that. And that's maybe even a conversation for another time, but of course I think it ties in here. So you know, I think a lot of folks, not everyone sees themselves as a woman in this space. So increasingly we're trying to sort of broaden our language around that, but recognizing how important women or non-binary folks who've kind of experienced the impact of, you know, oppressive forces in our society that impact women in particular. But anyways, kind of broadening that kind of conversation, right? That there's complexity to how we even use that term. But I just love kind of any of your reflections on either of those points now.
Yeah, thank you for addressing that, Gabrielle. It is such a deep and rich, complex question. And for me, it's centered around those of us who identify as women or non-binary or femme, and the ways in which nurturing and passing on information, I think, is really important amongst women. And what you all have spoken to and what Diane and Leah spoke to in their videos around the lineage, particularly for Black and Indigenous women, to be passing down knowledge. And for me, as the daughter of immigrants from India, one side of the family were herbal doctors and had a strong relationship to plants and healing and medicine in India. But we lost all of that here. I remember my mom and her friends used to go forage for what were weeds growing out of the sidewalks of the sort of suburban, ex-urban town I grew up in. I don't know the English name of it, but it was a plant that they knew and they ate, and they would kind of be wandering around collecting it, and bump into other Asian women who would be wandering around collecting this plant. And so I'm really grateful for and inspired by the ways in which I also see women not only doing the work, but passing along the knowledge. And so I recently met with some partners who offer a week-long course called Cowgirl Camp, and they've invited me to come, and I'm super excited to get some hands-on. I have some friends who do a holistic sheep grazing operation, and I've run sheep a little bit, but this opportunity that's designed for women to come do something that otherwise would feel intimidating or inaccessible. I'm really grateful for this space, and the ways in which I do see, for us, we work closely also with the Coalition of Oregon Land Trusts, and there's a lot of incredible women's leadership all over our region. And I think we are changing the way in which we do the work, as well as the outcomes of the work itself.
Yeah, a little more to add on to this conversation. Even in the past year and a half, I've been really inspired by a lot of women in the world that are adapting. There's been a lot of people just like dropping everything kind of as things started to unfold and transitioning their whole program or their whole farm operation to be able to continue and succeed in like the changing landscape with all the new challenges. And the way that people did that so quickly and was really inspiring to see. And I over the past year also, I feel like our lens is broadening, and I feel like we're a lot of women leaders are creating space. There's more inclusion. I think there's a real intention for it to be more inclusive in all the things that we're doing, and I feel that pretty strongly.
I like the themes of that sort of inclusion and the passage, the sharing, the tending and transfer of knowledge that you were kind of speaking to, Rose, I think, and how sort of that's done in community or in relationship. I've been reading some great work from sociologists. For Angie Carter is when it comes to mind, a friend and a colleague of mine who and others writing about sort of a new relational agriculture, but really thinking about, and it's not just about agriculture. Faith Kearns writes about it in her science communication book, but about how like we have to come into a new relationality with each other and with the land. And I think obviously many Black, Indigenous, people of color have been speaking about that since time immemorial. I think sort of a Western industrial model kind of has shifted us away from some of those ways of being, but I've been really I'm inspired by that sort of thinking about coming into new relationship with myself, with one another, with the land, and how that kind of fosters a sense of hope in undoing the learning that I've sort of gained about how to sort of be in relationship, to do my work, to be efficient. Like I feel like all of these things are kind of like, it's pushing me to think about being in relationship differently, and that relationship is the foundation, and I think women have so much to offer that, but it's not like central to only our domain. Like I would hope that it's something that filters out as a new way of kind of being in communication and in relationship with one another, or new, maybe not new, a remembered way of being. So I don't know if, I'm just kind of curious, for all of you are working kind of connected to the land, but if there's like, Amy, you talk a little bit about dry farming, and Heather, some of the producers you're working with, but are you all seeing kind of a way of being and working with the land in a different way, or than you have seen in the past? Like I definitely am, we're talking about soil health so much more and climate resilience. Like how is that manifesting in terms of like the way people are talking about caring for the land? Is that gives me hope that there's more conversations that are kind of pushing the envelope about how we have to, come into a new old way of being in relationship with the planet, especially facing down climate catastrophe that we're experiencing greatly here in the Northwest, but we're experiencing everywhere. So yeah, curious if you all are kind of feeling or thinking about that in different ways. Go for it, Heather.
All right, I guess I was going to let me go, but I'll take it. Thank you for that question, Gabrielle. One of the areas that the new administration and our Secretary Vilsack, what we are looking at with USDA is climate smart agriculture. And with climate change, we really need to address how we are changing. As we have seen in the Pacific Northwest and a lot of just in the West in general, um, just extreme droughts, extreme wildfires, and I believe we are wanting to, speaking for the Natural Resources Conservation Service, we are wanting to work hand in hand with our indigenous communities as well, the tribes. There's been a lot of traditional ecological knowledge that hasn't been embraced in the past in trying to work with the tribes in that. And I'm speaking specifically the practice of prescribed burning. In some areas, there has not been a lot of prescribed burning that has traditionally been done. Here, where the three of us are at in the Willamette Valley, prescribed burning has been done for many, many years from the indigenous peoples, and that would be one way that we're looking at how can we get fire back on the ground so we can reduce the amount of catastrophic wildfire in the areas. But again, soil health is pretty amazing, and cover crops, as Amy had stated, cover crops are so important to how do we keep that moisture in the soil and have some good soil health practices. How do we, I know again, the tribes and indigenous people, BIPOCs, have been using traditional methods for time immemorial. And now there's this new wave of regenerative agriculture, which is what Black indigenous people of color have been using for a long, long time. But those things are at the key in anything the NRCS or the Soil Conservation Service had done is soil health. That is what keeps having healthy soil is what is going to keep us going. Thank you.
Yeah, soil health is super key to dry farming and, soil moisture retention. And in the past year, though, with like the extremes we've had over the past summer with those 100+ degree days, and we held a field day. We decided, even with all the changes in COVID restrictions, the Delta variant, we decided to stick with one in-person field day, and we had 60 people come out to like look at crops that had not been irrigated in our dry summers. So for those of you that aren't from this area, we don't really get any rain in between June and through the end of September typically. So people came out in August to look at crops in the ground that hadn't been irrigated mid-August, and we're shocked to see, like, after all the 100+ degree days, that anything was living out in the field. And I had a lot of people contact me after that field day saying they really wanted to kind of plug into the research. There's the Dry Farming Collaborative, this community of practice. They wanted to use their land and start to contribute to the research. So this idea of being a part of something or contributing to something that's bigger than just ourselves, our own microcosm, our own farm, our own garden. I feel like that is, I've had a huge upswell in people. So while the drought and all the fires and everything, all the extremes globally are quite tragic in a lot of ways. I think I mentioned in the video too, when we were talking that, a lot of this is a catalyst. Maybe it's catapulting us collectively to this level of action. Like we're finally ready to take action more together. So that's been something I've noticed.
Well, I know we're actually really close to wrapping up our session, but I wanted to raise one final kind of quick question, and I'll pass it to you, Afrose, first. But I'm curious if there's like a resource, a book, a poet, a song, anything that you want to share that you kind of want to like leave people with that is giving you hope. And I didn't totally prepare everybody for this, so I will go first and just say this. And many people probably already know this, but it's not a brand new book, but Leah was on, and it's the Farming While Black resource. It's a wonderful book, obviously for folks who do identify as Black and African American and Indigenous, but it's been a good education for me as someone who is white identifying, and just to learn a lot about the work of the Soul Fire Farm and the Land Back movement and reparations and how that's all tied. So it gives me also hope, but it's also a good resource. So Afrose, anything that comes to top of mind?
Yeah, this is the hardest question you've asked, Gabrielle. But I've read Farming While Black, and I found that I really benefited from it. And I read it at a time when I was living and working on a remote farm that was engaging in regenerative practices, and was thinking this book really, really informed my way of relating and to the land. Yeah, I'll share a teaching that I learned from a Native elder teacher of mine that we call Auntie Jeanette. And we were out in the Sierra Nevadas for 10 days, and she taught me and another group. I was lucky to be in a nature connection program that allowed the BIPOC folks in the program to have separate time to really deepen into skills and learnings, while the white identified folks kind of went and worked on undoing white supremacy culture. And so Auntie Jeanette taught us that, I think either it's the manzanita flower, I believe, that if a bee comes and does its little bee waggle dance in the right hum, the right frequency, the flower opens up and responds to the bee, so the bee can enter and pollinate. And it's one of the most beautiful things that I've learned on the land that in this moment even makes me emotional.
Oh, I love that. Thank you, Afrose. Heather?
Like Afro said, this is the hardest question. The only thing I can think of that really has inspired me is something that just coming off of Hispanic Heritage Month or Latinx Heritage Month. A new group that I found inspiration from, and it's not just one song, but it's a female mariachi band, and it's called Florente De La Huache. And Florente De La Huache was singing mariachi music in the White House last week. And they were walking up and down the White House singing mariachi music. I've never seen that ever in my life. And this women mariachi group is pretty amazing. You can find them. They're on Spotify and others. And those groups breaking the barriers of a typical men's mariachi group. Just an all female band has been very inspirational. And um, this past month, September, October of Hispanic Heritage Month is something that I've been trying to do with my kids, is to play music from Latinas that are singing, that my kids can hear them singing in their heart language, because there's not a lot of times in our space that we can hear our heart language, and in ours is Spanish, and just sharing that with our kids. So thank you for that question.
So cool. Amy, You get the hard question, although everyone's answers have been very beautiful. So
Yeah, this is a hard question. I have an easy arm's reach book that I just finished that, well, a few weeks ago, but it's the Braiding Sweetgrass with it's Robin Wall Kimmerer. And, you know, that it was talked about by Diane in the session this morning, this like our relationship and the reciprocity, but all the stories. This book, I savored it. It's broken up into sections that you can kind of read and savor. So I savored every bit of it, and I have a few people I'm going to share that one with. So highly recommend it if you haven't read that one.
wonderful. And I wish I had it off the top. I just encourage people to go to that book, and there's so many beautiful passages, but we are at time or above time. Thank you so much to Rural Assembly for everyone being here, and to all of you for joining me in this conversation. And yeah, be well and find hope where you can, folks.